Hi everybody, it's Carla. I'm back with another reading out of Light from Many Lamps by Lillian Eichler Watson from 1951. This one is about Abraham Lincoln and something that he said at his inaugural address in March 1865. The 4th of March 1865 started out to be dull and rainy, but later in the day it cleared and it turned out to be a pleasant after all for the day's second inauguration. The streets were filled with milling crowds of people, with cavalry, patrols, and police. The inauguration platform had been built on the east front of the Capitol, and here there was a vast sea of humanity, stretching as far as eye could see, filling the great plaza and flooding out into the grounds beyond. As the president appeared and took his place on the platform, a tremendous roar swept through the crowd, rolling back like thunder to the outer edges, loud and prolonged. Abraham Lincoln had not expected such an ovation. He had not, in fact, expected to be reelected at all. No man in American history had been so hated and reviled, so bitterly denounced, as he had been for the past 4 years. They had been difficult years, years of great struggle and suffering, of agony and bloodshed. He had taken over the leadership of the country at a time of grave crisis and had given his best efforts to maintaining and preserving the Union, the only thing that really mattered. But he had been misunderstood, condemned, humiliated in public and in private, assailed alike by friend and foe. One newspaper had called him the obscene ape of Illinois. Horace Greeley had written an editorial demanding his withdrawal in favor of another candidate, declaring, "Mr. Lincoln is already beaten. He can never be elected." His life had been threatened over and over again. Even today, though every precaution had been taken, he knew there were many who feared for his safety. No, he had not expected to be reelected, not even with the high tide of the Confederacy broken and victory at last in sight. With Grant's vice closing in on Lee and Sherman moving up from the south, it was clear that the war was almost over. But he felt no elation, either at the recent victories in the war or of his own unexpected victory in the polls. He saw the hand of God in both of these events and was humbly grateful for the chance now given him to complete his great task. He harbored no resentments, had no slightest wish for retaliation against those who had cruelly slandered and abused him. He had one interest only, to conciliate the rebellious states and rebuild the Union he had sworn to preserve. The great crowd fell silent as he stepped forward to make his address. The sun, which had been obscured all day, suddenly burst through the clouds and flooded the scene with brightness. He spoke slowly and clearly, his voice vibrant with emotion, aware of the great importance of this moment and the potential influence of any words on the nation. He spoke this: "On the occasion corresponding to this 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All knew that slavery was, somehow, the cause of that war. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Each looked for an easier triumph. Both read the same Bible and prayed to the same God and invoked his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us judge not, that we be not judged. The Almighty has his own purposes." The huge crowd listened without a sound. This was not party language. This was not political phraseology. Abraham Lincoln was talking out of the fullness of his heart to a people and a nation he loved, appealing for peace and tolerance, for understanding, and for an end to sectional bitterness and strife. There was no hint of self-aggrandizement anywhere in his speech, no boasting about being reelected, no praise for his administration and what it had accomplished. The Union was the main theme and his main interest, a strong, united, unbroken nation, firm in loyalties and ideals. He wanted no gloating, no malice, above all, no malice. The issues involved were too vast to admit to malicious dealing. His aim was to end all feelings of hatred and resentment between the North and South, to bind up the nation's wounds, to prevent, insofar as possible, the unhappy aftermaths of war. He closed with this passage, which has been called the purest gold of human eloquence. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.